All rise.
Your Honor, before we call out the jury, could could I approach the bench
You
by
may.
the next witness?
You may be seated. See, you can call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls James Stalter.
Sir, come up front here. Thank you. Should all swear you in before you take the
Yes, sir.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth and the penalty of law.
Yes, sir.
Go and take a seat.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Stalter, could you please introduce yourself to the jury and start by saying and spelling your first and last name?
My name is James Daniel Stalter, James. Last name is Stalter.
Thank you, Mr. Stalter. Mr. Stalter, do you go by a nickname?
JD.
Is it all right if I call you JD?
Yes, ma'am.
JD, where do you live?
Rio Rancho.
How long have you lived in Rio Rancho?
Almost 20 years.
Okay. Is there a neighborhood you live in?
It's just, I don't know the neighborhoods.
Subdivision
I'm
or anything?
off of Northern Announcer area.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Country Club Plaza?
Yes.
About how far from the Country Club Plaza is your house?
10 minutes, 15 minutes max.
Okay. Now I want to take you back to last year, Memorial Day of 2015, May 25th, 2015. Do you recall that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you do anything special that day?
We drove in from my daughter's house in Mesa, Arizona.
Okay. And about what time do you think you got back to Rio Rancho, approximately?
7:30, 7:45, into Rio Rancho.
And what did you do when you got into Rio Rancho?
Went to get something to eat.
Where did you go to get something to eat?
Arby's on Southern.
Okay. And when you drove into Arby's, did you notice anything?
We had to avoid an officer's unit, which somebody pulled over. Had to kind of squeeze behind them to get into the drive-through.
Okay. Mr. Stalter or JD, if you look in front of you, there's a binder with some exhibits, and they're numbered numerically. If you could find State's Exhibit 124, please.
I guess I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be looking for this.
Can I approach you?
Thank you.
They're on the back, so number should be 160, 140.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
124, you said?
Yes, sir. Okay. Does that, looking at that, does that, can you show, is that the Arby's that you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you say that you had to, when you went in, what direction did you go?
Where the officer's unit is parked there now, I went right, there's, as I pulled off of Southern, you pulled in and then made an immediate right into Arby's parking lot.
And you said you had to squeeze by somebody?
Yeah, the officer's unit was kind of half blocking that drive pad, so I just had to come in behind him.
Okay. And then, did you guys go inside the restaurant?
No, we went to the drive-thru.
Okay. If you could then turn to Exhibit 125.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now, does that show the drive-through window?
Yes, it does.
And where was your vehicle when you...
Parked at the drive-thru window waiting for my food.
Okay. Now, from that vantage point, did you see anything, well, could you see any activity between the vehicle that was pulled over and the officer who had pulled over the vehicle?
I could see the officer talking to the driver.
Okay. Now, did you have a good look at the driver at that point?
I could see the driver at that point. I could see the driver and the officer.
Okay. And was the driver a male or a female?
Female.
Okay. And what kind of interaction, if any, did you notice between the officer and the female?
They were talking back and forth, and then the conversation seemed to get a little louder.
Okay. Could you hear exactly what was being said?
I couldn't hear what the lady was saying, but I could hear the officer saying into the car that somebody was lying. I don't know if he was talking to her or the passenger, but he said that you're lying, you're lying.
Well, who was driving, well, who all was in your vehicle, first of all?
My wife and I.
Your wife and yourself. And who was driving?
I was.
Okay. So were your windows open or down?
Her windows was open. Well, actually, they were both open because I had mine waiting for the food and she had hers open.
Okay. Now, could you see at that point, could you see the passenger?
No, the bush that you're looking at in that photograph was blocking my view of the passenger of the vehicle at that time.
Okay. And you're talking about this bush right here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Can you give this, the Jewish some water?
She has a drink.
Do you need a break? Ma'am, do you need a break?
No, I'm okay.
You okay? All right. We continue.
Thank you. So is this the bush that you're talking about right here?
Yes, ma'am.
So that bush from where you were in your vehicle is where? Over here?
My vehicle was further towards the window.
Okay. Could you step down with the court's permission? Maybe it's better if you drive the pen.
Okay.
If you could just point on this, it'll show up on the screen. And if you can, kind of direct your testimony towards the jury so they can hear you.
Sorry. My vehicle was parked right about here with the passenger side facing the bush and the driver's side facing the window.
Okay. So you had a clear view of the passenger, excuse me, the driver, but not the passenger?
The driver, but not the passenger.
Okay. And did you continue to watch?
Yes.
And was there any particular reason why you were watching?
I knew the officer.
Okay. How did you know him?
I had met him once before. He purchased a four-wheeler from me about a year before.
Okay. And So while you were sitting there, did the officer, what did you see happen with the officer in the vehicle?
At some point, after he was telling somebody in the car that they were lying, he came around the back of the vehicle, which he would have came around this way and got between that vehicle and that bush and was telling whoever was in the passenger side to get out, get out.
Okay. And did anybody get out?
No.
What happened right after he told the passenger to get out?
The car started and they drove away.
How did they drive away?
Um,
I mean, was it drive normal, slow, fast?
Oh, they didn't squeal tires or anything like that, but they pulled away quickly.
And what did the officer do? What did Officer Benner do?
He went to his vehicle and got in his vehicle and followed them.
Okay. Now at that point, are you and your wife still waiting for your food?
They were just handing us our food out the window at that point.
Okay, so what did you do then?
I turned around and followed him
And why did you follow him?
because he was alone and I knew him.
Okay. And did you know him? What kind of person was he? What did you know him to be?
Just from what I met him at, from purchasing the four-wheeler. Nice guy. We got along really well. Joked around for a while in my garage.
Okay.
That's all I really knew about him.
Okay. So you continued to follow him, and at some point, did you stop the vehicle?
Yes, ma'am. You can't see that from here.
No,
But
you can't see that from there. Hold on a second. Actually, this is Exhibit 404. Now, do you recognize that, don't you, sir? You recognize what that is?
Yes, ma'am.
Whoops, it's upside down. Now, that's better. You recognize that?
Yes.
And how do you recognize it?
This is Pine Tree. This here is the officer's car. This here is the car that they were that he was following, and this is me. I was still in the parking lot at that time.
Okay, now there's some initials and a date on there. Did you make that diagram previously?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, now, don't want you to sit down yet. I'm going to show you something else. This is a blow-up of State's Exhibit 392. You want to take a minute to orientate yourself to that, and I'll ask you to make a couple of markings on it. Do you recognize what that diagram depicts?
I do.
What is that?
We have the Arby's here and Albertsons in the parking lot, and then the back side of this off of Pine Tree here, there's a post office here and then Memorial Park across the street.
Okay. What I'd like you to do, JD, if you could first, taking the blue marker, make a rectangle to depict where you and your vehicle were stopped at the drive-thru when you were observing the stopped vehicle by the Arby's.
Just make a little square.
Yeah. And if you could just put your initials there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when the vehicle took off, which way did it go through the parking lot?
All I saw was when they took off this way, and then I didn't see them again until I came around.
Now, when you left the drive-thru, did you have to go around the Arby's?
No, I actually went around the bush and just turned around, made a
Okay.
right turn right around the bush and went back this way.
Okay. When's the next time you caught sight of Officer Benner's vehicle and the vehicle he was chasing?
When I followed this road here, I came around this corner here, and as soon as I come around, I could see his lights when I got right around that corner there,
And you could see his lights.
facing Pine Tree.
Could you see the other vehicle too?
When I first saw it, no, I just looked at the lights. I didn't see the other vehicle until I was about halfway down this area.
Okay. Now, at some point, did anything happen to make you stop your vehicle?
As we came down this road here, I got to about where this tree is here, and I heard gunshots.
Okay. Could you put a circle there and,
Right here?
yeah,
Or-
where you heard the gunshots? Okay, and it's really hard to see that, isn't it? Could you make that just a little bigger?
Sure.
Sorry. It's hard to see on that dark background. There we go. And then just put, GS for gunshots. Okay, now when you heard the gunshots, what did you do?
I sped up, and I came around the corner here and stopped right over here.
Okay. So if you could, sir, if you could just put another square or rectangle to depict where your vehicle came to a stop, approximately. And you put JD there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, so when you heard the gunshots, first of all, how many gunshots do you remember hearing?
I heard 3.
Okay. Do you know if you ever previously said that you heard 1 or 2?
No, I heard 3 or 4. I know I heard 3. I might have heard 4, I don't know. I heard 3 for sure.
Okay. And when you heard those shots, where was your attention focused?
On the officer.
Okay.
Or between 2 vehicles, because I could see both vehicles at that time. When I first heard the shots, I was focused on the 2 vehicles.
And how close was Officer Benner's vehicle to the other vehicle?
If I had to guess, feet, maybe 50 feet.
And
If that.
that's an estimate.
It's an
You didn't
estimate.
measure it, of course.
Yes, ma'am.
So, did you see Officer Benner get out of his vehicle?
No, I did not.
Okay. So after you heard the gunshots, what did you do?
Again, I sped up to that location right there,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched Officer Benner take a few steps.
Do you need some water, sir?
No, I'm okay. He took a few steps from behind he was on the driver's side of the vehicle he was stopping. He took a few steps out from behind that and then collapsed.
Okay. And what did you do when you saw him collapse?
I was still rolling when I saw him collapse. I grabbed my emergency brake. I was out of the vehicle before it stopped, and I was focused on him, just trying to get to him.
Did you see, in relation to the other vehicle, JD, when you saw him fall, could you see where he was in relation to that other vehicle?
Behind it, between his car, between his unit and the car.
Okay. So had he reached, I'm trying to think how to ask this. So, let me look. I can find a better photograph. Well, on your diagram here, let's look at your diagram. So, is this, can you show on your diagram where you're depicting where he was in relation to the vehicle, correct? So maybe describe that for us a little bit.
When I saw Officer Benner first at that location, he came from the driver's side of this vehicle, took a few steps back, and collapsed in the middle of the street right here.
Okay, so he was by the driver's side of the vehicle that took off.
That's where he'd come from, yes, ma'am.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, now, JD, were you able to see anyone inside? Let's back up for a second. Because you've already said that when you were stopped at the drive-through, you could see the passenger who was a lady.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sorry, the driver who was a
The
lady,
driver, yes,
but
ma'am.
not the passenger.
Right.
When they took off, could you see either the passenger or the driver?
I saw both of them as they took off, yes.
Okay. And what was their demeanor?
They were smiling when they drove off.
Did you have?
I couldn't tell if they were laughing or not, but they were definitely smiling.
It appeared that they were smiling.
They were smiling.
And did you have a clear view of both the passenger and the driver?
Yes, ma'am.
What did the driver look like?
I don't know ages, but thick lady, kind of longer hair. That's all I really remember about her.
Okay. What about the driver? Do you remember what the driver looked like?
That was the driver.
I'm sorry, the passenger. Was the passenger a male or a female?
Thin male, short hair.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell his complexion?
Not really,
Okay.
to be honest.
Did you see him well enough to be able to positively identify him?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see him anywhere in the courtroom?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is-
Objection, objection.
May we approach?
do at that point?
I think the first thing I did was I took the officer's microphone off his left collar and called it in.
Okay. What, do you recall what you said?
Word for word, I couldn't say, but I know it started with officer down, officer shot. I tried to give him a location, but I don't know exactly how I gave that location. Something about the post office.
Were you pretty distraught when you were at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
When you were rendering aid, in fact, did you sustain any injuries?
I did.
Okay. You could turn in the book again and find exhibits 133, 134, and 135.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's start with 133. Oops. Okay. It's kind of blurry, but do you recognize what that is?
Yes, ma'am. It's the index finger on my left hand.
How did you sustain that injury?
I took my Kershaw out of my pocket and I was trying to cut Nigel's. Shirt off so we could get it. We couldn't get his vest and everything off. We had to take his shirt off, and we couldn't lift him enough to get it off, so we had to cut it off.
Okay. Let's see if I can make this one clear. Nope, that's making it worse. Okay. For some reason, it doesn't. May I show this to the jury, Your Honor?
Can you take that out of the plastic?
Yeah, that might help.
Like that.
Doesn't help much, but you can. Is this the injury right there?
Yes, it is.
It's kind of hard to see. This is maybe a little better, closer up shot of it here. In Exhibit 135. Is that also your finger?
It is.
And is it showing the injury that you sustained
It is.
right there?
Yes.
So is that from when you were trying to cut his vest off?
Yeah,
Or
the
shirt
knife.
off?
The knife was fairly sharp, and as I cut through, my hand was there holding the shirt, and it just cut right into my finger.
Now you gave a statement at the scene to an officer, and did you also go and give a statement at the police station at some point?
I did.
Okay. And then you gave a statement with defense counsel and investigators?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and then of course you testified here today.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you testified each time to the best of your recollection what you recall,
Yes, ma'am.
based on the questions that were asked?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor. At some point, in addition to, well, do you remember who took the photographs of your injuries, or when those were taken?
I believe that was at the police headquarters at Quantum Road.
When you went to give your statement?
Yes, ma'am.
And did they also take what are called buccal swabs?
They did.
Did they tell you what that was for?
Yes, because I explained to them that when I was trying to resuscitate Officer Nigel, that more of my blood was on his chest than his own. And that the officer said, well, that explains why we couldn't figure out why there was two blood types on him. I said one of those was mine.
Okay. Thank you. I will pass the witness.
Morning, Mr. Stalter.
Good morning.
So, Mr. Stalter, you told the jury that when you were at the Arby's drive-thru, you were unable to see the passenger inside that SUV because the bush was in the way, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so, after this interaction between the driver of the SUV and Mr. Benner, the SUV took off, correct?
Yes.
And that is when you saw the female driver, as you described, smiling, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you saw her in the mirror, her face reflected in her side mirror, right?
No, I was looking right at her.
Okay. But you didn't see their faces at all until that vehicle took off, correct?
No, I could see her face the whole time.
Okay, thank you. So you
Yes,
saw
ma'am.
the female's face the whole time, but the male's face or the passenger's face you saw as the vehicle took off, because then the bush wasn't obstructing your view anymore,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Okay. So up until that vehicle, the SUV, took off, you could not see the passenger, correct?
That's correct.
And you said that you clearly remembered that the vehicle started and then took off, the SUV, right?
That's correct.
So that vehicle, in your mind, what you remember, that SUV was not running when you were at the Arby's.
It was not.
And you actually recall so clearly that the female driver was smiling because you stated in your interview that, quote, it was bullshit that she was forced to drive, right?
Yes.
Because she was smiling, right?
She was smiling.
So it was in that split second you see the face of the passenger as the SUV takes off on the drive-thru, right?
Yes.
And you would agree that this case, the case against Andrew, has received a lot of media attention.
I guess.
I mean, the cameras are here today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
The cameras are here.
And you were, intricately involved in this case. I mean, you were one of the first people on scene, right?
Yes.
And so you have been interested in how this case is sort of playing out, right?
I'm not a big news person. I don't watch the news that often.
I understand. But you, as far as news coverage, this would be a case that you'd be interested in, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Because you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
And you would agree that there have been a number of stories on the news, on TV, that show Mr. Romero's face, right?
I couldn't say. I don't watch the news that often.
And there's-
Romero or not.
All right, and you'd agree that there's been newspaper articles about Andrew Romero that have his face on that as well, right?
I couldn't say.
You wouldn't know if
I
that's
don't,
been in the
I
news?
don't read the newspaper.
Okay. So, at the time when you gave your police statement to law enforcement, that was June 9th of 2015. Do you recall that?
I don't remember what date it was.
Would it help you recall if you saw a typed up interview?
Sure.
Your Honor, I believe that's one of the transcripts we received.
Approach, counsel.
don't have to read out loud, but if you just look at the top of the date up there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you would agree that your interview date with law enforcement was June 9th of 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And did you know, Mr. Stalter, that that was after Mr. Romero had been charged with this crime?
No, I'm not aware of that.
When you went and you talked to law enforcement about what you had seen that day, they never put a picture in front of you to say, is this the person, did they?
No, ma'am.
They never gave you pictures of a couple of people to say, could this be the person, did they?
No.
They never had you go and look at several people standing, called a lineup, and say, can you identify the guy from the SUV?
No, ma'am.
And so would it be fair to say then that the first time that you're saying that you pointed at Mr. Romero in court today, or even identified him with this crime whatsoever, would be today as you testify a year and a couple months later?
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Stalter, at the scene, you never identified the driver or the passenger to law enforcement, correct?
No, ma'am.
Judge, may we stop?
They weren't there.
May we approach? You may. Mr. Chavez, go make us a copy, make 2 copies of this. And that.
Could we take a quick break? I can continue, wherever you'd like.
You want to take 3-4 minutes to get it done, so let's not, it's 11:25 now. Let's not take a break till lunch. We can wait extra, also, okay, what we like, then we get the picture.
Sure.
It just takes 15 minutes to wait it out.